Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Chris Shang, and today we've got George, who is the Global Vice President of Reich. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Chris. Great to be with you.
Of course. Tell us a little bit about Reich for those of us that don't know, super large organization, but tell us a little bit about what you guys do and the kinds of companies that you guys work with.
Yeah, happy to. So Reich is in what we call the collaborative work management space, and our mission as an organization is to empower people to do the best work of their lives. And if you look at most organizations, the challenge that we have is you've got, the C-suite defining strategic imperatives, and then it trickles down to different parts of the organization. But the way that imperative is interpreted and executed on, there's challenges there. Plus, people use all sorts of different tools. So, for instance, you might have marketing might have their preference of how to do work, and sales has their own tools, CRM and whatnot, to do the work. And so, if I'm a leader and I want to know how my strategic imperatives are being executed, it's very hard to gain any sort of visibility. In addition to that, when you think about alignment across organization, efficiencies, collaboration, all of these are challenges that most organizations face. And that's the problem that we are trying to solve. Basically, trying to create a platform that the entire organization can work together on with a very low barrier of entry that actually allows leadership and also just employees to have clear visibility, alignment of objectives, and create efficiency across the organization, driving greater productivity, leading to the metrics that organizations are looking for.
Got it. Very cool. Before we kind of dive into your experience there and specifically your role there, just kind of scanning through your LinkedIn, it seems like you spent some time as an operator, in engineering, and before you got your MBA, and then you kind of went more into the business side of things around technology. But tell us a little bit about just kind of like the origination story for you. Like, where did that interest in the tech space come from? Where did that curiosity stem from?
Yeah, so I guess right from my childhood, I've been an engineer at heart. My earliest memories are breaking things down and trying to assemble them back together. So I think I was always an engineer at heart. I kind of knew that from a professional perspective, there would be two paths that I'd pick. It's either music or technology. But coming from an Indian background, music's not an option. So I ended up going into tech, and so I got my bachelor's in engineering and electrical engineering, and then I came to the U.S. to Columbia to do my master's. And that's when I really, so I was in power systems and distribution, and I decided I want to pivot into, networking, wireless networking, and comms, right? And so, in my early days in Columbia, I pretty quickly realized that tech is where I want to be. And I remember as I completed my graduate studies, I had all, like competing offers. I had opportunities to work in Wall Street, but then I had an opportunity to move to Chicago and work at a smaller boutique consulting firm. And the consulting firm in Chicago was actually offering far less money. But I decided to go down that path because, again, it was the fact that it was in tech. I had a chance to get my hands dirty with switching, routing, distributed computing. And that was one of the best decisions I made. It was questioned by a lot of people at the time, but
Sure.
it set me up on the path that I'm on. And while there, because it's a boutique consulting firm, very small, we all have to get our hands dirty. And I was surrounded by people with, 20, 30 years of experience. So I absorbed a lot. I used to work long days, but I enjoyed it, right? And I was just constantly learning. And during that time, I got exposed to virtualization. And to me, that was like the coolest thing since sliced bread. And because of my aptitude and interest, my president then basically said, you know what, you want to take a risk? Why don't you run with it? Work on establishing a practice with, there was another individual, and we did. And that was my foray into Citrix. And so that was back in, I would say 2004, 5 maybe. And I've been, that from that point till about 2021, that was kind of my space, right? So I did consulting, then I went into a global law firm running the Citrix practice. I was at a hedge fund for a little bit, and then Citrix basically said, "Come work for us." And then I moved to Citrix in 2012, established myself as a thought leader in the space of end user computing, and the rest is history. So while at Citrix, I held various roles, mostly in pre-sales and sales engineering. But towards the end of my career, I had a chance to build our value engineering practice, and then from there, establish our tech incubation for Center of Excellence, which is when Citrix acquired Reich for about 2.2 billion. And that
Mhm.
gave me an opportunity to work on Reich. And while doing that, the founder of Reich basically asked me if I want to come run pre-sales. And at that time, it was a no-brainer. It was still part of the Citrix umbrella. So it just feel like, I knew that I had to move away from virtualization. I always felt like it's no longer the disruptive solution technology that it was. And it's kind of, at its, not, I wouldn't say end, but it's kind of like a mature technology. And I wanted to move into something that's a little bit more disruptive. And to me, collaborative work management is a space that pie is only going to continue to grow because of the pain point it solves. And I thought of this as a great opportunity to delve into it. And I haven't looked back since.
Very cool. I love the explanation. Out of curiosity, what kind of music would you have pursued? I see the keyboards in the background, so I still imagine it's somewhat in there.
Yeah. So, I remember my mom telling me back in the day when I said I wanted to pursue music, she's like, not on my dime, go get a degree. And then at some point when you're going to enjoy music a lot more when your food on the table is not going to depend on it. And I think she was right. Because now that I have a stable job and there's no pressure on creating music, I enjoy creating music. And so, um, back in the day, I was into classic rock. I used to follow, I even, heavy metal, all sorts of things, pop. Of late, I focus mostly on Christian contemporary music. So I'm part of our church worship team, and then I, try to, when I get time. It's been almost 8 months since I made something just because of
Yeah.
work, but when I get time, I like to sit and think around and arrange music.
Yeah, it's not bad. Yeah, I asked because we do get like people who have pursued the arts to end up in this kind of space, and like I'm always curious as to like the itch that it scratches in the tech space, right? Which is I think like the improvisation of how fast things go, and so like you're still feeling this. I don't know what the next note is gonna be, but I'm gonna like try a few different versions to see how I can make it, how I can make a melody out of it. Or you kind of get the analogy, but yeah, that's super interesting. And 8 months isn't like that far away. It does, seems like you definitely still play. It's not just like it's a piece of furniture in the back. So
Oh,
that's
for sure. I mean, I still sing. I'm singing at church this weekend, so I'm still singing actively. But when I designed the space, my thought was, you never know when creativity hits you.
absolutely.
You can, go back and forth. And your point on technology and music intersecting is so true. Like I find that a lot of technologists are musicians in some way. Like either they play an instrument or they're doing something. And I think you're right on, right? There's an element of creativity in both. And there's, as time has gone by, there's an element of technology too, right? So we think about sound engineering and MIDI controllers, like so that is appealing to people. And I think if you look at a lot of musicians, they develop an aptitude towards math and science.
Yeah.
I think that's the common thread that I find.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially like, yeah, I mean, it's hard for musicians not to be also involved into the technological aspect of production, right? It's like
Yes.
it's very much a part of it.
Yeah.
Um, Interesting. Uh, so kind of like just your trajectory of how you kind of merge like tech and business, and operating like these different kinds of projects and spearheading them pre-sales. Um, it's almost like you are, I mean, you're basically operating like an incubator within a larger organization, right? To figure out what are the next new features or product ideas that you should start scoping out, and then ultimately kind of pulling the resources to make it happen. Um, Different than a startup, but similar to a startup, right? I guess the only main difference is like you have more resources to allocate towards it. But how do you guys, or how do you think about like figuring out which problems to go tackle next? Obviously, I think it's within a wheelhouse of the context of the business that you're in.
Yeah.
But for example, like at Citrix, and how was that experience like? And then how has that changed or evolved as you switched over to productivity with Right?
No, that's a great question. So maybe I should level set on a few things. So first of all, like a lot of my background at Citrix was in sales engineering, and
Yeah.
I find a lot of people still don't know what that is. So maybe I should kind of explain. So when
Yeah.
you think about sales, there's two elements to it. There's the actual seller, but then there's the element of understanding the customer's business problem, mapping out a solution, showing proof of value to the point where you technically close the deal so you can have the commercial conversation. And that individual is the sales engineer. It's a very crucial part of the sales motion, right? I mean, without that trusted advisor, it's very hard for a customer to understand what the value of your offering is and quantify it in some tangible terms. So that is kind of that used to be my space, and I did that for a long time, and I frankly believe it's one of the best jobs ever for people that like technology and like people, right? And it's kind of at that intersection. So once you find a lot of sales engineers are people who've been deep in tech for a long time, and then realize, okay, this tech part's getting easy, it's black or white. I need a new challenge. And they want to explore more into the business side of things without all the risk of the 50% commission. So there's kind of
Yeah.
so the problem now, no, you might have 5 conversations in a week about the same topic, but all go in a different direction because of the people that you're interacting with. And that dynamic gets super interesting. It's like a challenge you want to solve. So that's sales engineering. So I did that for a long time. And when you compare and contrast Citrix versus right, at Citrix, we were a fairly mature organization. We had, I think at one point, 10,000 plus people. And so it was very structured, right? You have your guardrails, you've got, your job description. You pretty much, for the most part, try to stick to that. When you try to deviate, they push you back into that lane, right? I mean, now obviously my own career was different and I was able to challenge that status quo, and which is what led me to pioneering a number of things at Citrix. I was the first distinguished sales engineer. I was the first solution strategist. Got to build a value engineering team. But in most cases, it's pretty structured, and it's very hard to drive change. It's like it's just too many operational headaches that to deal with. You compare and contrast that with an organization the size of Reich. Reich's about 1,000 employees, but we operate much like a much smaller organization, almost like a startup. We're very nimble. We're very dynamic, flat. So there's no like bureaucracy. We empower people to if you got ideas, go for it, right? And prove it out. So that's to some people like me, that's exhilarating. Like I mean, I hadn't seen that part of the world, the world before. I was used to large organizations, and just coming in an environment like this and just being able to impact change at the pace that we can, it's amazing. So when I came in at Rec, and this is the best way to explain it. So first of all, today I run the customer solutions and innovations group, and I'll get into that. But when I came in, I was responsible for our sales engineering group. Now, as I mentioned, sales engineering is mostly paired up with sellers, and the goal is really to drive that top line revenue. But then over time, I've been able to kind of change the mindset. So first of all, I rebranded the team to being solutions consultants because I wanted them to have a very solution-centric approach as opposed to the bells and whistles and gadgets, right? It's about solving business problems. And I wanted them to be consultative in their mindset. So even the brand was a way to get them to shift the way they think, right? So I got into that team, and I was brought in to kind of pivot the team from being commercial mid-market to being enterprise-centric and understanding value selling and all that good stuff. So that was a journey for about 18 months. And, like when I started, they were mainly focused on demos. Over time, they were focused on a lot more than that. It was really becoming that customer's trusted advisor and moving the business forward in a variety of ways, whether that's analyst briefings, marketing events, thought leadership. So, it took, again, it taught, as leaders, one of the things that we have to be really good at, we have to have a clear mission, vision, and you have to be able to get the people to believe in it. And you have to also show that it's not just about the mission, you have a plan of action. And you have to you have to crystallize how each one of them fits in that plan of action. And you have to keep reiterating that and going back to so like, I remember my very first meeting with the team. I remember 6 months later going back to the team and saying, hey, we discussed this. Here's where we are. That's how no one's going to respect you or trust you. You have to earn that. And so that's something that, I was very conscious of, and I worked really hard on. And it was a journey, right? It took about 12 plus months to get my team to really trust me and believe in me and go from there. And then from there, you talk about innovation and whatnot. So I realized very quickly that an organization like Right needs, us to do more than our job description entails. And so like I worked on that and figured out ways to pivot the team to move the business forward in other ways. So like establishing industry principles and demo engineering on all these pillars, eventually leading to what is now, which is the customer solutions and innovation team. And the idea behind that org, and it's kind of unique in our space, honestly. Typically, most organizations separate pre-sales, customer success, professional services. They're all different pillars. We've actually combined everything. And at an organization our size, we can take those risks and bets, right? And the thought process behind combining everything is that if you think about the customer journey, it's extremely fragmented and broken today. So think about most SaaS organizations. You might have an inbound trial motion, or you're going outbound and basically getting a customer. You have your initial SDRs, AEs, SCs working on it. You pay, you kind of pitch the apple, they buy the apple, and then you hand it off to another team, which comes and thinks it's an orange. And so now you got your customer success and PSEs. First of all, not fully aligned with what was sold. So they keep going through that discovery exercise again. And now as the process moves along, you see there's so many disjointed activities leading to a really bad customer experience, which then leads to churn and not growth, right? So that is the problem that I'm trying to fix. Like what I've basically done is we've taken CS, parts of CS, professional services, SCs, solution innovation, and digital all together. And now that they're all together under one roof, I can make sure the incentives are aligned, and that makes sure that basically leads to a journey where the handoffs are smoother, leading to a better customer experience, which then leads to the right outcomes for the business. So that is the experiment that I'm hedging my bet on. And it's been an interesting journey, but you can only do it in organizations of a certain size. Like if I went to Citrix and said this is like probably harder to pull off, but Right being the way it is, we placed this bet and we are already seeing the dividends as a result of this bet. So and you asked about what type of innovation are we driving. So like the things that I'm involved in, I'm very closely aligned with products. So we talk about we are the voice of the customer. So as products thinking of the roadmap and things like that, our input is instrumental. So we give them feedback on long-term strategy, short-term strategy, and help guide that. We work with marketing on everything from seminars, webinars, conferences, like TSI, things like we are actively working hand in hand with them. We work with our CS organization in driving adoption, so making sure in the customer success journey we are helping our CSMs in that value creation. We also work. I mean, our primary job is obviously helping customers in that articulating the proof of value. So that's another critical piece of the puzzle. We work on go-to-market strategy, right? So when you think about what are the right solutions to take to market, we have an active voice in making sure we're thinking about the problem in the right manner. And then my team works with our marketing team and product team and kind of packaging those solutions. So as you can tell, there's a lot of different pieces. And the key to be successful in this, again, is understanding where your team stands, what are the strengths and weaknesses of each individual, where can you plug them in, knowing what they're good at, but what their aptitude is on. So like, how does it fit in their career trajectory? And then again, making sure that they all understand the big vision. So like, I've been able to do that fairly well, where 1 + 1 is equal to 11 is my motto, and I think my team's really like working hard to drive the organization forward.
Got it. And how do you, I guess, like, how do you measure success in these instances, right? Like I can imagine, you're looking at retention, you're looking at, perhaps contract value or the ability to expand deals. I guess like, how do you measure success versus like, previous processes?
Yeah, so I think there's a few different levers there. So first and foremost, I think every team within an organization needs to be aligned with the corporate strategic goals. So like the way we do it is we look at what our corporate strategic goals are. It trickles down to our team, and then our team, I then take that and divide that amongst all my groups, and each one of them then has to figure out, okay, I think I can contribute to X and Y, and then for these are the specific things I'm going to do over the course of the year. not a plug for Reich, but we manage all of this in Reich. Entire OKR management is in Reich. If anyone's interested, ping me on LinkedIn. I can help you understand the value. But you basically, starting from the corporate strategic imperatives, flows down to the team, flows down to the individual leaders within that team, flows down to the individual, and I can track the entire path, right? So like, how is each individual doing against those goals on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, quarterly basis, and then how that all contributes to the business. So that allows me to go to my leadership and say, here's exactly how I contributed. So that's one way. Now, broadly speaking, all of these strategic imperatives will be tied to two things, right? It's about top line revenue. It's about gross retention. So, and in essence, it's net ARR, operating margins, all that good stuff. So that doesn't change. But you have to make it meaningful for every individual. How exactly are you contributing to that? That is what I try to do with the MBO OKR system. And and we don't try to change it too much quarter. So we have broad goals for the year, but we have incremental goals for each quarter. And then the next piece is that incentives are only good if it means something monetarily. So then now you take the variable piece of your OTE and make sure that's aligned with the PR. So that's kind of how we do it.
Got it. Super interesting. Yeah, super interesting. And in terms of like, I guess, from the perspective of the current like landscape, specifically, I guess like around SaaS, right? Like I feel like in some of these conversations that I've had, there are organizations that are definitely like seeing a slowdown in growth and are struggling in terms of like, innovating fast enough to compete with some of these potential like AI agents that are kind of come in and things like that. But how do you guys think about it? I think obviously how do you think about it from an organizational standpoint, but then also, like how are you thinking from a sales engineer perspective where you're, trying to make sure that the unique problem statement of each customer is actually being realized all the way through, right? Which obviously can make a big difference in terms of like how the stickiness of the product, right? But yeah, just curious. I'll stop there, but like it's a pretty big question.
Yeah. I mean, this is what's top of mind for all of us, right?
Yeah,
Because
for sure.
the last few years have been tough for tech as a whole, and especially when you're talking about a solution space that is, I mean, in terms of the product market fit, it's there, but it's not all the way there. A lot of customers still view it as nice to have as opposed to a need to have. So as a business, what we have to constantly think about it, how are we going to make it a need to have, right? So, and how do we do that? The way we do that is we have to get a lot of organizations. You can see that the messaging is changing to be much more vertical centric, right? So as opposed to horizontal, right? So it's about what can the solution do for healthcare? What can the solution do for manufacturing? And then clearly articulating the value proposition in the customer's language, right? So what are the specific business problems that we can solve, and how do you quantify it? So as a business, that's kind of what we're doing, like creating solutions that are vertical centric, that speak the customer's language, that clearly articulates the value that the customer gets, especially for our ideal customer profile.
Yep.
As a sales engineer, this is where the space is evolving, because if you think about sales engineers, they take a lot more pride in the engineer compared to the sales, right? So they still like the technology. They like to focus on features and functionality. And the reality is that no one cares, right? I mean, it gone are the days where you could go and talk about widgets. You have to be able to articulate value. So, the things that I focus on are, I don't know if you've heard of like, demo to win. That's like a methodology. Like, basically, how do you go about thinking about your meeting and structuring the meeting so that you're delivering, that's beneficial for both parties. Presentation skills, storytelling, active discovery, medpic, all of these soft skills, like they need to learn, right? I mean, technology, I know, any SE can pick up technology. That's a given, right? But what makes them extremely valuable is when they are able to connect at an emotional level or can articulate the business value of a solution. So that is where, and you talk about, AI. AI is great, but AI can never replace humans on that one level, because because we can articulate value and connect with people on a level that AI can't. So like we have to use SEs need to learn to leverage the tools at their disposal. Like AI is absolutely a tool that need to leverage. So for instance, if I'm going into a meeting tomorrow with a customer in the financial sector, I can use AI to do all the research I want about that customer, understand exactly what pain points they've had, have they had some security breaches, whatever, right? And then use that in how I approach my meeting, right? And how I quantify the value that the product brings. So that's kind of how I look at it. So I tell my my team members that the only constant is change. Back in the day, you could have a degree and say that it covers you for 20 years of a career. No longer the case. You have every 3 years you have to adapt and evolve. And the ones that are going to survive are the ones that have a penchant for learning, are not afraid of being disrupted, love being uncomfortable, and are constantly investing in themselves. And those, I mean, an SE's world is that, right? Like they have to be so dynamic, products changing, customers are changing. And if you get a little complacent and are not constantly kind of trying to up level yourself, you're stuck. So that's where I'm focused on, really challenging them, pushing them to their full potential, and then also like trying to empower them to be in situations where they normally would not be.
Got it. Very cool. As we're kind of like running up on time, real quick, last question here is for you and your role at Reich, like, you know, I'm sure it's still scratching a certain itch for you, and you speak with a lot of conviction and passion around what you're doing. But like, you know, do you have, what is kind of for you, for George, like, what are you hoping to constantly be like, where do you imagine yourself in the next like few years here professionally in terms of like personal fulfillment, right? You know, do you see the evolution of Reich and your role there, and continue to build up these processes as something that continues to like tickle that curiosity? Do you ever have any interest of like trying to find a new problem to go solve and perhaps go into entrepreneurship on your own? Just curious.
No, that's a great question, and something that, if you asked me 10 years ago, it would have been a very different answer. What I've realized over time is, I mean, as much as I like technology, after some time, technology becomes kind of boring, right? And so, so I derive satisfaction these days in seeing my team flourish. Like really, I mean, every day when I wake up, what motivates me is to help my team realize their true potential. And that is not based on their job definition. It's about really understanding my team members, what their true capabilities are, and plugging them into situations that they themselves might not know, they'll be able to, right? So that is a huge motivation for me. So I'm at Reich because first, I really love my team. I believe in the people and the culture. But most importantly, I think my product is fantastic, right? And I if I didn't believe that there's a market and like an opportunity to be had, I wouldn't be here. I strongly believe in collaborative work management, and I strongly believe in the problem that our solution in particular solves for our large enterprise customers and what differentiates us. And so long as that's the case, and I can wake up every day believing that and knowing, being excited about the day ahead, I'll be here. So those are the reasons why I'm still at Reich, and I think there's still a lot of opportunity ahead of us. In terms of my future, I really like this, so long as I'm able to be challenged and learn, right? So like for every year at Reich, my role has evolved and I've taken on more, and there's always been a new challenge to pursue. That is my mission in life. Like, so long as my career is on a trajectory where I'm constantly learning and I'm constantly uncomfortable and I'm maturing, I'm happy, right? Does that mean that I'm doing sales engineering forever? Probably not. I mean, I don't know. I mean, one of the reasons I did the MBA was was to see how it broadens my perspective, and it has, right? And so that the way I think about problems and my future is different based on just that education that I've had. But long term, I certainly aspire to get into the entrepreneurial world. But after my kids are off to college and I can take a few calculators.
Fair enough. On that note, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your journey, and then also what you've been doing at Reich, and super interesting, different perspective, than some of the other guests. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris, for your time. Much appreciated. Take care.